Life could be a dream.
Gee, I don't know. With that introduction, we're going to clear the stage. I thought I was supposed to jitterbug out here or something. I'm afraid that's a little beyond me. I want to thank Jennifer for that kind, if perhaps hyperbolic introduction. I'm here to speak about the upskilling of the American workforce. America is a great country, and it was made so by the middle class. But the middle class today is embroiled in a great, what I would say, global conflict. And the greatest weapon we have in that conflict, the greatest weapon, is career and technical education. The people in this audience are officers in that conflict. You change lives and you create futures. That's why business and government must enlist with you. What you do has never been more important. That's why, in another way, the theme of this conference, boom, these are your boom times. What you do has never been more crucial to America. I'm from Snap-on. I'm a tool maker. We make tools. But we come to this subject naturally. And let me explain to you why. We were founded in 1920. And in 1920, there were 7.5 million vehicles on the road. There are 300 million vehicles on the road today. So the auto industry was just starting. But comes an engineer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His name was Joe Johnson. And he gets an idea. Take 5 handles of different shapes, an ellipse, a T, and so on, and put them together with 10 sockets of different sizes. He fashioned them so they snapped on interchangeably. It was an innovation that revolutionized tool sets all over this country, and that tradition of innovation has echoed down all these 9 decades. He also did something else. He built the tools out of what we're told was the greatest steel of its day, and so when you picked up those tools, and we have a few that are left over, they feel sturdy. And if you pick up a Snap-on tool today, I think you will think it's quality. But here's what he did that had the most foresight. He instructed his salesmen to go into the shops and lay those tools, those 5 handles and 10 sockets, out on green felt, as if they were as precious as surgeons' knives, implying that if the mechanic bought and used these tools, he would declare to the world that he was doing something special, as special perhaps as a surgeon, and his work was worthy of pride and dignity. The idea of the respect for the dignity of work is at the base of what Snap-on does. That's why we come naturally here. That happened in 1920, and it echoes through today. The company has grown over these years. We now do business in 130 countries, and we have 4,800 of these trucks that you see riding around the country, and we have 11,000 associates in addition to those 4,800 franchisees who are in the trucks. And we're in 2,500 schools, we have 27 factories, and we make 65,000 different products. And I like to think, I'm very fortunate to be part of the company. It's interesting, my path. You heard the official story, but I'll give you the people's resume. I started life as an engineer. I was an electrical engineer, but actually my first job was in a school system. I was a football coach. Some people say I should have stayed there. I think I would have been better at it. I enjoyed it, certainly. I fought with the American Army in Vietnam, worked as an engineer at the Ford Motor Company, worked in finance at the United Technologies Company in Carrier, and then one day I was in strategy. I was the strategic planner for Carrier, and one day the president of Carrier said, well, whippersnapper, if you think you know strategy, why don't you go to Asia and do something about it? I thought I was going to be there for 3 years. I was there for 11. Came back to the United States, ran their global business, and then Snap-on needed somebody to internationalize. I came to Snap-on. And all those years, I have started more than 24 factories, acquired more than 36 companies, moved 15 times. But here's the thing I'm proudest of. I delivered my own daughter in the back seat of a car in an A&P parking lot at 4:30 in the morning. Let me just say, for those of you who may be expecting fathers there, when you get in the car and your wife gets in the back seat, start to worry when you're on the way to the hospital. This is not good. Anyway, so in those days, you didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. Well, we didn't certainly know, so I pulled into that A&P parking lot, ran around the back, played catch, and my only training had been, I refused to go to Lamaze training. My mother always thought this was divine punishment. But I had seen Ben Casey, and those of you who are old enough to remember Ben Casey, he held the baby up by the ankles, right? Okay, that's my training, right? And so I knew enough to hold the baby up by the ankles, make sure the mouth was clear, you know, the umbilical cord, hit her on her rear end, heard her breathe her first breath, and utter her first sound. But my wife couldn't see, and she said, "Is it a boy or a girl?" And in the back seat of the car, in the A&P parking lot, at 4:30 in the morning, in the dark, I was fooled by the umbilical cord. That's a true story. But I recovered from that. I recovered. Somehow I like to think that qualified me for my current position, but I don't know. You know, this is a true story. Okay, so look, Snap-on is an extraordinary company, and I feel fortunate to be there. I'm not a lifer. I've only been here 12 years. But it is a company that makes 80% of what it sells off our vans here in the United States, right here in America. And a hand tool is 50% labor. If you don't think that's a lot or unusual, check how much labor is in a TV or a phone. And it's difficult to keep them on shore. So Snap-on is sort of the quintessential American company. And we are very proud of America, and we think America is exceptional. But sometimes we see or we hear that phrase, American exceptionalism, isn't accepted, particularly in towns, say, north and east of here, near the Potomac River, that's in no state, you know, that's in a district. It seems to be not so accepted. It seems to be thought that it is American exceptionalism is a thought that's maybe a vestige of the past, that's outlived its usefulness, or that it defines some past condition. Well, Snap-on does business in 130 countries around the world, and I visit many of them. I just came back from France on Sunday, and I will tell you, without equivocation and without qualification, that America is the greatest country in the world. We have more comfort, greater mobility, and wider range of opportunity than any country in the history of this planet. And if you doubt that, let me give you a few statistics. We have twice as many paved roads as the next largest road system. 7 of the top 10 universities in all the world are here. And as a businessman, I tend to pay attention to customers. So in 2008, there were 5.6 million people lining up to get green cards in the United States, into the United States. Last year, that number was 14.7 million, 3 times as many. So somehow, and by the way, the 14.7 million is 7 times greater than the next largest country, the next largest queue. Somebody isn't confused about whether America is exceptional. If you want further proof, anybody read the paper today? Well, I read the paper today, and you know, the New York Times said, restless cities in the east, Ukraine. It said, the Wall Street Journal said, diplomacy initiative needed in the Ukraine. The Washington Post said, Ukrainian government is creating chaos, perhaps is creating chaos. The Financial Times said, Russia tightens down on the Crimea, and the USA Today actually said, Ukraine, a nuclear option may be needed. Now, these are Eastern Ukrainians, Orthodox, trying to maybe do harm to Western Ukrainians. Ukrainians all. But when I read this, I thought about this today, and I realized that I lived in the Northeast. I'm from the Northeast, you probably tell from my accent. And we used to live cheek to jowl to each other, and on the left was Catholic Ukrainians, Western Ukrainians, and on the right of me was Orthodox Ukrainians, and we got along just fine. Why did those people get along here and not in Ukraine, in the Ukraine? And the answer is we were Americans. And America is a unique country. It is one of the reasons why we are special. You see, Americans are Americans not because of a common ancestry. We come from many different places. Not because of a particular religion. Many forms of worship are found here. Not even because of a particular geography. The map of America has changed as often as the stars have changed in our flags. Americans are Americans because we believe. We believe in common things. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And let me focus on the phrase pursuit of happiness, because the founding fathers, when they wrote that, they really meant prosperity. They really meant people being able to keep their families warm and safe and dry, to have an occupation for which they had dignity and pride. In other words, they could achieve the American dream. And so it has been for all these years. It is why America is the greatest in this history of the planet, because of that phrase, the pursuit of happiness. And how has this happened? Well, America's happened because we've had brilliant leaders. We've had some great leaders: Washington, Lincoln, Edison, Ford. But you see, America hasn't only achieved on the brilliance of the few, it has ascended on the efforts of the many, everyday people. 1777, Valley Forge. The Continental Army is freezing to death. I kind of relate to that in Chicago this year, actually. But the Valley, they're freezing to death. Christopher Ludkin, a simple baker. He plied his trade and became known as the Baker of Valley Forge, and he kept the Continental Army alive so they could go on to win the war that created the republic that has been so dear to us all these 2 or 3 centuries. The brilliance of the few, but the efforts of the many. Historians as far apart in history, in time and space as de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, 1835. James T. Adams, Epic of America, 1935. David Landis, The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, talking about why certain countries ascended versus others, spoke about the power of the middle. Americans knew how to do things broadly, and broadly contributed. Just recently, Paul Kennedy wrote The Engineers of Victory. He talked about the Great World War II. And he gives proper respect to the troops, but he also talks about the people here who created the industrial base. People like Rose Hill Monroe from the hills of Kentucky, who went north and worked in the Willow Run plant in Michigan, who had been converted from cars to planes. And she worked side by side with her sisters. She became known as Rosie the Riveter. And she and her sisters created the industrial base that allowed us to win the one war we could not afford to lose. America has been delivered by the efforts of the many. Consider Henry Ford. Henry Ford, brilliant guy. He had an idea. But his idea could not have been actuated, could not have come to fulfillment without amplifiers, commercial amplifiers, I would call them. And he chose the greatest commercial amplifier of his day to match his idea up with, the American workforce, dedicated, energetic, focused. Together they created the American auto industry. Now Henry Ford got rich for it, and he should have. But along the way, he created the opportunity for millions upon millions of Americans to create lives of prosperity, fulfillment, satisfaction, dignity, and pride. And that played out from sea to shining sea with people like Joe Johnson, who founded our company, or Edison, or Andrew Higgins here in Louisiana. And this has been the matching of ideas and people that have created the prosperity we know and hold so dear and prize so much. But you see, we're challenged today, I think. We are challenged. It would be wrong to say we aren't. You can look at those same papers, and you look at the New York Times says that the recession has not ended. And the Wall Street Journal says few have confidence. And the Washington Post say unemployment has risen for college grads. And the Financial Times of London says that low growth is the new ordinary. The President of the United States in the State of the Union says that American economic power is threatened. And the darling of Washington is a book by Tyler Cohen called Average is Over, in effect questioning whether the American dream is still possible. Some question the American dream. Well, we could ask ourselves that too. Is it that we have no more ideas? Maybe America is out of ideas. That could be it. Well, actually, if a measure of ideas, say, is the Nobel Prizes. Since 1901, the Nobel Prizes was started in 1901. There have been 876 Nobel Prizes. America has won 39% of them. Now, you might say, hey, we built up a lead early and we're cruising on that lead, like a basketball game or a football game or something. Well, it just ain't true, because since 2001, we've won not 39%, but 46% more. So it isn't the ideas. We still have the ideas. Hey, maybe it's the workers. I think maybe it's the workers. The unions have screwed everything up. You know, they really goofed everything up, probably. Well, I'm here to tell you, when I walk the floor in our union plant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or our non-union plant in Elkmont, Alabama, or our plant in Murphy, North Carolina, or our distribution center in Olive Branch, Mississippi, or our center in Carson City, Nevada, I see the same energy and focus and dedication that I imagine Henry Ford saw all those decades ago. So, is it the workers? Not really, but here's the problem. American workers still great. Here's the problem. When I walk the same spaces in Shanghai, or Minsk in Belarus, or Sao Paulo in Brazil, I see dedication and energy and focus. You see, the natural American advantage is no longer ascendant, no longer differentiating. What we need to differentiate American workers is capability. And that's what career and technical education is all about. The way to make Americans, the great middle, ascendant again. Lincoln knew this. Lincoln, in September 29, 1859, in the Wisconsin State Fair, said, education is the power of America. And the National Association of Manufacturers knows this. National Association of Manufacturers says 2/3 of the 13,000 manufacturers that are a member of this association say that a skilled workforce is the #1 criteria in deciding where to locate a plant. And yet that same organization will tell you that they have 600 jobs they can't match the skills to. People say the middle class is shrinking. I say, no kidding, Sherlock. Because manufacturing jobs, 30% of them have disappeared in the last 20 years. And you can look at other industries, see that kind of thing. And so what's needed is career and technical education. There is a question. The question is, where do we go from here? And many people say that the American worker is the problem. I say no, the American people are the answer. And career and technical education is the way to show them home. That's what you do. That's why what you do has never been more important. Now, business and government, I think, should, in fact, business as a matter of social responsibility should want to enlist with you. I have 3 suggestions, though, or 3 thoughts for your consideration. The first is that there is a need to match curriculum to what's really needed in industry. Now, I think you have this underway in Louisiana with industry certifications and things like contracted curriculums. But there needs to be a continual effort. Snap-on is working on this ourselves. We're part of the National Coalition of Certification Centers, and we are partnering with 100 community colleges to try to help certify students in skills that will be recognized by employers. That needs to be done, and more businesses need to be involved with you. And I think community colleges need to accept this, because I think there is a need for a natural matching. Secondly, we need to make sure that we measure in the right way. I would offer this, that the end product of an education should not be a degree. It should be a career. And I think that, and I would offer that community colleges should be measuring themselves on how many careers they launch, not how many degrees, or any colleges for that matter, actually. I have to tell you an anecdote. I happen to have dinner with the university president, and I asked him, well, your seniors getting a lot of jobs? This is a 4-year university president. He says, the seniors getting a lot of jobs? He said, yeah. So, well, how many? He said, well, we don't really measure that. I said, why not? He said, because I view my job as taking 18-year-olds and maturing them into 22-year-olds. I went, gee, I know an organization that will do that and pay the student. It's called the Army, you know? And actually it's true. So I think there is a little bit of activity that needs to be done on the academic side to kind of focus on that. Now usually this is where people in the audience think, gee, this is where industry wants to get the government to pay for the training. That isn't my idea. Snap-on can train, we can train our own, actually. We would like to take community colleges, but big companies can train their own. GE can train their own. The problem is smaller companies cannot. And the job-creating engine, as you have heard, not to a complete extent, but to certainly a large job-creating engine in the United States is small companies, and they need this help. We want to get help from you too, but if you didn't come to the party, we could have apprenticeships and so on, bigger companies, but small companies need this. And just so you know, small companies, the amount of people employed in small companies have moved from 51% 20 years ago to 46% this year. So small companies are not prospering here. So this is the kind of thing that needs to be robust and strong, matching the curriculum and measuring correctly. Now another one. It's a little bit harder. Number 2. Technical education has a heck of a PR problem. Heck of a PR problem. I would say that most Americans, or Americans, view people who opt for technical careers as having opted for the consolation prize of our society. Now, I made this statement at a think tank in Washington, attended by a group larger than this, in fact, and I got a pushback. People said, oh, no, that's not true. So then I said, how would you in this audience feel if your nephew, son, or daughter told you they wanted to be a car mechanic or a welder? And you could have heard a pin drop in that room because they knew the answer to the question. And yet, these are jobs which keep families warm and safe and dry and have delivered America from evil for over 2 centuries. It's true. What's happened in America is we have lost the respect for the dignity of work. And this guy who writes about the American dream going away, that's because people think they're letting the American dream now be morphed into something that it never was. The American dream today, I say for some people, is you achieve the American dream if you become a baseball player, a TV anchor, a college professor, a CEO, an investment banker, or an attorney. That's not the American dream. Some of those are like hitting the jackpot, huh? But the American dream really is, should be, and always has been, the people who have been part of the everyday group, everyday people who have delivered this country, that have made their families warm and safe and dry and work at a job that has dignity and they can have pride in it. And I am here to tell you that there is pride in the auto garages of America. I know this for a fact. So what we need to do is get our leaders and all of us speaking about these careers, these endeavors, not as a consolation prize, but as a national calling. Because if we don't re-energize the middle class, America will not find its path to future prosperity. It is a national calling. Now, I remember, I'm old enough, probably in this audience, I can't see everybody, but probably almost no one remembers this. I remember Kennedy, right? And Kennedy got on TV in the early 60s, I think it was 1961, and he basically said, we're going to the moon by the end of the decade. And thousands upon thousands, if not millions, of young people viewed becoming a technical person, whether in a technical school or being a physicist or an engineer, as enlisting in a national service almost. That's what we need around technical education. Because if we don't re-energize the middle and upskill the workforce, we will lose the global conflict we cannot afford to lose. We need to urge our leaders to do this. We need to adopt that same rhetoric ourselves. We need to change the consolation prizes to the national callings. Believe it. Finally, I want to point out that none of this is possible without, I think, support, collective support. Business should support it, I think, education, but also government. And I want to point out the difference between endorsement and support. I go to Washington all the time. I hate to say that, it's like being consigned to a puzzle palace. But you go to Washington and you walk around. I can go to any in the office of any representative or any senator or the president himself and get them to say, I support technical education. But you see, what we know is if you're a CEO, what you see clearly is there's a huge difference between endorsement and support. He really means he endorses, that person really means they endorse technical education. Because when at Snap-on, every idea that's brought to me is a good one. The wacko ideas get eliminated before they come to me. And so all these ideas come, and I know that I can endorse all of them. Yet I only have energy and capital and focus for a few, so I must choose. We must demand that our leaders support rather than just endorse. Because too many leaders are willing to say that technical education, we endorse technical education, but when it comes to time to support it with money or energy, they're willing to sacrifice the interests of technical education on the altar of other priorities. This happens all the time. I'm sure you've seen it. Now, there are leaders who will do this. Like, for example, I'm chair of Skills for America's Future, and we have leaders involved in our business that will, in that group that will support this. But Penny Pritzker, who's now the Secretary of Commerce, is a great believer in this on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, Governor Mary Fallin in Oklahoma is a big supporter of this. I was with Governor Scott Walker the other night of Wisconsin, and there are some that will support this, but we must demand that all of them do this because it is crucial. Now, it's easier said than done, though. I put it to you. Do you support technical education? Would you support technical education and choose its cause over, say, other social causes? Say, over balancing the budget? Not so clear. If you can't do it, then who will? You must say, I will support technical education. Now, business has to do the same thing. One of the problems with business is, I can tell you, business always complains that, government doesn't pay attention to business. Well, part of the problem with business is our lobbies, like the National Association of Manufacturers or others, never saw a leaning or favoring initiative that they didn't characterize as crucial. That's what happens. And so, therefore, there's an abdication of this. But I'm willing to tell you this. Snap-on is a company that pays 33% in taxes. 33%. Now, those of you who are familiar with tax rates know that this is among the highest in the land. And we would benefit greatly from a reorganization of the corporate tax. We would. You can take my word for it, but you could look it up and you'd be able to tell this. And I will tell you that the corporate tax is goofed up. It is wrong. It drives the wrong behavior. It should be changed. Yet I will tell you that we favor investment in commercial and technical education before we would favor a change in the corporate tax, because we believe it's more important. That's what the difference is between support and endorsements. We have to think about this, because support and endorsement requires trade-offs between two meritorious events. I urge you to demand that your leaders favor career and technical education. And we will do that because we believe, Snap-on would do this, and I would support this because I believe there is no path to ongoing prosperity for this great country without expansion of career and technical education and the upskilling of our workforce. This is a great country. It has been delivered and made so by the middle class. But the middle class is in a struggle to be the commercial amplifiers of our day for the ideas of our day. They are in a global conflict. And it is a conflict like World War II that America cannot afford to lose. And career and technical education is our strongest weapon in this conflict. My prescription and my suggestion is we must match the curriculum to what is actually needed at the workplace. We must measure ourselves in a way that makes sense in terms of careers as opposed to degrees. We must change the idea that these are consolation prizes into national callings. We must restore the respect for dignity of work, and we would make the American dream what it has always been. Keep your family warm and safe and dry and have dignity and pride. And then we must demand that our leaders give us support, not just lip service or endorsement. Because you see, if this were an actual shooting war and the enemy was at the Canadian border, nobody would be debating whether we should invest in tanks. If Pell Grants were about tanks, in that situation, they'd be pouring money into it and it would be matching to what we wanted. That's right. And this is a war, and we need to impress that upon our leaders. So let me just finish by saying that what you do is crucially important. You really do make a difference. And in my role, I am a student of careers. And so as a student of a career, for choosing a special career, you have my congratulations. What you do really provides the path for America's future. You do change lives and create futures. This is your boom time. And without what you do, vehicles don't roll, oil doesn't flow, cities don't rise, buildings don't grow, memories aren't made, planes don't fly, and I dare say freedom doesn't ring. So as an American, you have my admiration. And then as someone who enjoys being part of, or enjoys and gets satisfaction from being, even in a small way, a cause like this, which is so contemporary and so compelling, for allowing me to be here with you and to give you my message, you have my thanks. Thanks, and have a great conference.
What a tremendous, tremendous message of focus on career and technical education. I have to tell you, I wish you'd been my coach. What a message.
Thanks.
What a message.
Thanks.
How about another round of
Thank you.
applause?